What is up, friends, YouTube and motorcycle enthusiasts? Accelerate coming at you with a video that I've been wanting to make for a while, and that is on Zone 2 and the magical discovery that I have made about Zone 2. Now, unfortunately, I'm a little bit behind the power curve because Zone 2 has been around for a very, very long time in the fitness world. I'm just kind of figuring it out and ultimately why it's important. So I wanted to pass that information on to you. So let's get right into it. First and foremost, what is Zone 2? So I've talked about Zone 2 a little bit, mostly whenever I was doing my initial portion of the fitness series. I talked about the talk test and this essentially light aerobic exercise, no matter what it is. Okay, so Zone 2 is when lactate is below 2 millimole per kilogram of body weight, or about 60% of your max heart rate. So obviously, if you want to measure your blood, you would know exactly when your lactate is below 2 millimole, which is exactly what professional cyclists and some high-level top athletes do for their training. So we're probably not going to do blood work at our house or in the gym or whatever we're doing. So the easiest way to find it is ultimately finding your max heart rate. There's a couple ways to do this. The adage of 220 minus age is close, and then we can also input the formula of the heart rate reserve, which is a little bit better. Heart rate reserve uses our resting heart rate to calculate that particular aerobic zone of intensity, which is Zone 3. So essentially you can do all this with a watch, a smartwatch, a Fitbit, a Garmin, choose your flavor. Most of these things can calculate our heart rate zones pretty accurately. What I like about heart rate reserve is it's easy to do with a formula or just pre-calculated, and it also does it for you. And what it does is that essentially if you sleep with your watch, then you're going to get a really good resting heart rate to add to that equation, or that formula rather, and then it will help adjust as you get more fit, because as we know, our resting heart rate, oftentimes as our cardiovascular and circulation system gets more efficient, that resting heart rate will lower. So that's good stuff. If you don't have any of these things and you're just, you're on a shoestring budget, which is fine. A lot of people are not wanting to get into the gadgetry either. They don't want to mess with all that stuff. They just want to exercise. The talk test, and I've talked about the talk test before, and the talk test is essentially just exercising, and you can have a candid conversation without being, without essentially singing, right? You can't sing, but you can say around 4 to 5 words before you have to take a breath. So it's relatively mild intensity, right? That's what Zone 2 is. So it's right around the easy zone in a 5. If we break our heart rate up into 5 categories, all the way from you're just sitting there on the couch not doing anything, all the way up to your max, and we break that into 5 different zones. Zone 2 is pretty low on the scale. So next, let's move into how I discovered this and why I'm convinced that Zone 2 is one of the great keys, and what this will really do for us. So I started examining my heart rate during a hard enduro race. Not just racing, I guess, because this is obviously anybody that's doing exercise like this, it's not just for racing. They want to have longer rides, they want to be more fit, they want to have better endurance. And that's one of the things that I started looking at. I use a Garmin, there's no brand loyalty here. I just happen to have a Garmin, and I started recording my heart rate during races and just during rides where I was riding hard enduro type terrain, the stuff that I like to ride. So I noticed that my heart rate was around 130 to 161, which is pretty much Zone 2 all the way up to max, right? So my max heart rate's around 179. I've never done a max heart rate test, but I'm just using that 220 minus age, being 41 years old. So now the duration is also, we're looking at 3 to 6 hours. Now that's everything from a hard enduro race to just a longer ride day, riding 6+ hours, frankly. And we also do this over multiple days if you're doing a riding weekend with friends, or if you're, for example, doing some of the AMA, particular promotions and races within AMA. It's a qualifying, maybe another, maybe 2 qualifying races, and then the next day is the actual main event. So multiple days, multiple hours. So we start looking at elite endurance athletes, or elite athletes in general, and that's one of the things I started doing, is looking at exactly what they're doing for their training. And this is everything from cyclists, runners, triathletes, swimmers, rowers, you name it. If there's a track and field or a particular sport that requires you or the individual to do intense activity for more than 40 minutes, more than an hour, then we have to start looking at how these athletes are improving their endurance and their efficiency over time. And that's where Zone 2 comes in. So most of these folks, if you start researching and looking around, getting on YouTube, listening to a lot of professional athletes that are now coaches, which are frankly kind of giving some of this information out, we start to see that 60 to 75% of their training is done in Zone 2. So the reason why this is really brings us to, why is Zone 2 so important? So the reason why is they're going to slowly train the body to burn more fat efficiently. And the reason why I say that, if we were to draw a line of our entire spectrum of heart rate and our spectrum of output that our body is exercising, all the way on the easiest side is our body is using the energy system of fat. We're just walking around, we're not doing anything intense. And then we look to the other side of the spectrum where we're approaching our max heart rate, approaching our max output of a particular exercise, and that is particularly carbohydrates. So these energy systems, our body switches back and forth all the time. There's multiple energy systems, not going to get into that too deeply, but one of the things that is important about Zone 2 is that we're training that fat burning, or that mild portion. And that zone, from Zone 1 and Zone 2, we're burning fat, and that essentially trains the lactate clearing fibers, also known as the mitochondria. So why is this important? So it's training the fat burning energy system to be more efficient. That way, whenever we tackle a hill climb, tackle an intense rock garden, or we're going after a particular obstacle or a particular portion, it makes the glycogen energy system and carbohydrate utilizing energy systems on the higher spectrum of our heart rate more efficient. So we're essentially kind of like holding back. Our body is reserving that energy system and not using it whenever we are just resting or the basic ride, or we're not exerting a lot of energy. So it makes the whole system more efficient. So with these benefits, I kind of briefly blew past mitochondria, and I talked about this before. Training our endurance is one piece, our heart rate endurance and our energy systems is one part of that. The other piece is the mitochondria, which is the actual muscles. We know that if we take a long ride and we haven't ridden for very often, we're extremely sore. But yet, it's not like lifting weights. We didn't necessarily, quote, feel the burn the whole time we were riding, or maybe not even at all. Maybe we just did a leisure trail ride for a couple hours, but yet we're still sore. And the reason why is the continued use of those muscles they do fatigue, even though we didn't necessarily feel exhausted while we were doing that activity. So that mitochondria, the efficiency in which it exports and imports energy or oxygen during that process is a part of that training of Zone 2 as well. So next we have how to train Zone 2. So Zone 2 can be trained pretty much any way. Because we're looking at a target heart rate, it's 60 to 70% of our max heart rate, so you can literally ride a mountain bike, a road bike, elliptical machine, a rower, you can run, you can do jumping jacks. It doesn't really matter as long as you're hitting that particular 60 to 70% max heart rate range, and you're doing it consistently. So there is something called modality, and coaches talk about this a lot whenever they're training athletes, and the reason why is the question is, do we want to do something that is the exercise that is the exact opposite of what our sport is, or something that lines up? For example, if you wanted to train your balance or help train your balance, and also something low impact and something maybe that helps you pick lines and puts you in the body position similar to riding a dirt bike, then mountain biking could absolutely be used for your Zone 2. Or a road bike, even a stationary bike, even though there's no line picking, so to speak, it kind of transfers over. So a lot of people do gravitate to road biking and mountain biking that train for hard enduro. A lot of pros, a lot of people in general gravitate to cycling because it's something that has two wheels. So elliptical machine, a rower, again, also good stuff. It's particularly a rower because it does train the muscles, that mitochondria that I'm talking about, with the posterior chain, which is essentially our neck, the backside of our body, right? The back of our neck, our shoulders, our upper torso, lower back, our glutes, hamstring, and calves. So this all is used, as we know, with riding dirt bikes because of the hip hinge movement that we move back and forth, which is extremely important for the posterior chain to be efficient at. Nonetheless, we know that we can train Zone 2 essentially using anything. The goal is to train our heart rate, not necessarily try to make our riding better by doing something that is like it. So, nonetheless, choose your poison. So the next piece is, how often do we do Zone 2? How much do we do this? So if you were to look at a athlete that was looking to run a marathon, which your average person is going to take you 3+ hours, for example. If you were able to run 26 miles and some change, which not all of us could do, but if you were going to do that at a moderate pace, then it would be probably 3+ hours, unless you're a professional, which it gets pretty insane, some of the pace that these guys can maintain. So let's just say 3 to 6 hours. So if you were to look at an amateur runner that was going to do that, or even an amateur cyclist that was going to do a particular section that would take them 3 to 6 hours, how much Zone 2 would they be doing in their training? So ideally they would be doing 5 to 8 hours of Zone 2 per week. And studies have shown that that doesn't really matter if they're doing all of them at once, or if they're breaking it up in 1-hour sessions, or so on and so forth. So this comes down to programming and how we fit this into our particular, fitness model, so to speak. So my plan is currently to do 5 hours of Zone 2 per week, and I break that down into 5 1-hour sessions on the elliptical machine, and then I'm weight training 2 days a week. So I talked about building a program previously, But nonetheless, that's kind of what I'm gravitating towards. I'm still kind of in an experimental phase. Now, the key with Zone 2 that we have to remember as we're doing more and more of it is our body will see the benefit and then it will plateau. So you can do too much Zone 2, so to speak, not in a bad way, but it starts getting very time consuming. It is very time demanding, and the benefits start to taper off. You don't always get the same amount of benefit per the amount. But in any case, that pretty much breaks down most everything with Zone 2. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Put them down in the comments. If you just want to talk about fitness in general or what you guys are doing for fitness, then also put it down in the comments. We'll discuss. The final thing I'll add before I leave you guys is I have seen some pretty good benefits from Zone 2. I've been doing this for about a month now. I know that I'm coming off of surgery, and cardio is frankly one of the only things that I've been able to do consistently as I'm gaining strength back in my hands. And the footage you see here is me actually riding. It's my second ride weekend. My hands are pretty weak, but my cardio is doing pretty well, and I'm attributing most of that to the Zone 2 work that I've been doing. You will see changes. You will benefit from this Zone 2 work. So I hope this has been informative for you guys. I hope you got something out of it. Hope you guys are able to get out there and get on two wheels, ride a dirt bike. This is Accelerate once again, signing off.